All right, good morning, everybody. So today we are going to start into a new section, which is Chapter 2, Section 6. And Chapter 2, Section 6 deals with ratios. And kind of in conjunction with ratios, we're going to talk about proportions. What I want to talk about real quick about ratios and proportions is ratios and proportions are used a lot. This is one of the more applicable things that I'm going to teach you this year. Me personally, I do a good bit of cooking and things like that, and I use ratios and proportions quite a bit to scale up or scale down recipes, for instance. So hopefully these examples will make sense to you, and you'll actually be able to put this to good use in everyday life. So let's first start with the vocabulary, which is a ratio. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities. And then a proportion is a statement that two ratios are equal. All right, and so I'm going to show you the difference of what a ratio and a proportion is. People sometimes get these two words mixed up as to what they are. A ratio is basically a standalone fraction. A proportion is when you have two fractions and we have them equal to one another. So these say compare ratios. So we want to know whether these two ratios are equal. And in order to do that, we use something called cross products. And cross products are, you probably know, as cross multiply. So what that means is we're going to take these two numbers right here and we're going to multiply them. And we're going to see if they are the same. Or not see if those are the same, but see if that is the same as those two when we multiply together. So as I do this, you can see we're going to do 2 times 14, which is 28. And then I'm going to do 3.5 times 8. And when I do 3.5 times 8, I get 28. And the key part of this is to notice that the answer that we get when we did the cross multiplication, both answers are the same. When both answers are the same, we can say that these two ratios themselves are equal to one another. And that is what forms a proportion, is when you have two ratios that are the same. So those two fractions are a proportion. Now, if we look at the next one, I'm going to do 15 times 42. So that's the first one. And then I'm going to do 36 times 35. So again, to highlight, I'm going to do 15 times 42. And then I'm going to switch over and do 36 times 35. Now, actually multiplying those out, when I do 15 times 42, I get 630. When I do 36 times 35, I get 1,260. So these two things are not equal. Therefore, these two are not equal. That does not form a proportion. Now, they are ratios. This is a ratio, and this is a ratio. But those two ratios are not equal to one another. Therefore, they do not form a proportion. Now this one says solve the proportions. So the last thing we did here was to compare the ratios to see whether they formed a proportion. The first one was a proportion, the second one was not. Now what we have is a type of problem where they give us a proportion, but that proportion has an unknown value. In this case, it's going to be variable r. And what they want us to do is to find the number that we can put in for r that will make these things proportional or equal to one another. And the way that we do that is exactly the same way as we checked whether the ratios were proportional in the last two. We're going to do the cross multiplication or cross products. So we're going to multiply these two together. So we have r times 40 gives us 40r. And then we're going to multiply the 8 times the 25. So we'll set 40r equal to 8 times 25, just like that. And so we do need to simplify. 40r stays the same. 8 times 25 is 200. And from there, we need to solve this for r by dividing by 40 on both sides. And when I do that, I get r equals 5. There's my solution. So as you can see, we start with a proportion that has one unknown value. We do cross products to get it will usually be a 1 or 2 or 3 step equation. It usually won't be any more complicated than that. In this case, this is really a 1-step equation after you simplify it, and then, or I'm sorry, not simplify, after you solve it, and then you proceed once you simplify to solve it for r, and we got r equals 5. And so what that would mean then is 5/8 is equal to 25/40. All right, let's look at the next one. So the next one's a little bit more complicated because there is a little more stuff in the numerator than just one variable. You can see there's an x and there's a 4. And so I want you to recall what I had told you guys before about when you have an expression that has more than one things in either the numerator or the denominator of the fraction, there is a set of parentheses around that. And so if you have an expression like this or an equation like this, that does not have the parentheses, you should put the parentheses. And you're going to see why here in just a second. So I'm going to, again, do cross products. We'll start with the 5 times 3. So 5 times 3. I'm not going to use the x. I'm going to use 5 times 3. And then we're going to set that equal to the cross products in the other direction, which is this. And this is why you need your parentheses now. Because when you do the x plus 4, the quantity of x plus 4 times 8, it looks like this. And you need to have parentheses there because that 8 is going to distribute to both things. So what we end up with is 5 times 3 is 15. And then we have 8x plus 32. 8 times 4 is 32. All right, now we have an equation that we can proceed to solve. This equation right here is a 2-step equation. The reason why it's a 2-step equation is there are 2 things that are happening to the variable. The variable is being added to 32, and it's also being multiplied by 8. So both of those things have to be undone. We are going to undo the plus 32 first by subtracting 32 on both sides. You can see that I have now 8x equals, now 15 minus 32 ends up being negative 17. Negative 17. And then from there, we need to divide by 8 on both sides. And when I do that, I get x equals negative 17/8. Now, negative 17/8, if we want to, we can write this as negative 2 because 8 goes into 17 twice, and there's a remainder of 1, and you always put that remainder over what you originally divided by. And there you go. So that's how you do it. That is all I've got for today's video. Hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a great day.